everybody can see where they're sitting, that's fine. If anybody wants to move forward, please do.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. May want to dim some of the lights at the front so that we can see the screen better. Dim the lights at the front. Okay. That's it. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'll explain what the pictures are as we go along.
Oh wow.
Of course I can't read my writing now because of the lights.
Dark, you can't see his notes.
No problem. Okay, so this talk I'm giving to you today is an expanded version of a talk I gave in the shul a couple of months ago when we returned from Israel. So a few months ago, World Mizrahi came up with a project to ask synagogues from around the world to take part in the dedication of 1,600 Torah mantles in Jerusalem in the names of the victims of the 2023 Simchat Torah massacre. The project was a brainchild of Rabbi Andrew Shaw of Mizrahi UK, who, as we know, lives here in Edgware. So representatives of the shuls who sponsored the Sefer Torah mantle gathered in Jerusalem at the beginning of September for a 2-day event culminating in the dedication of the mantles at the Kotel, the Western Wall. So my wife and I were in Israel at the end of August for our grandson's bar mitzvah on Shabbat Kodesh Parashat Re'eh. That wasn't taken on Shabbat, that was on the Thursday morning. And we planned to stay on in Israel for a few days after the bar mitzvah. We therefore volunteered to represent Edgware United at the handover of the Torah mantles in Jerusalem. So we entered into the mood of the Mizrahi event on our journey down from my daughter's moshav in the Galil to Jerusalem on a Sunday morning, the 1st of September. We had heard that morning of the recovery of the bodies of 6 murdered hostages from Gaza over Shabbat. So we stopped off on the way down to Jerusalem. We stopped off in Tel Aviv at Hostage Square. There's a square in Jerusalem near the Kiryah, near the government buildings, where families of the hostages meet and they hold meetings to build up sort of some kind of feeling for the hostages. And we went there, and you see there a sign there with all the pictures of the hostages, and they have there a mock Shabbat table. You saw that on TV, I'm sure, with the names of all the hostages at the seats there. And there's a lot of information about the hostages and their families and what's happened to them. So we also had there in the hostage square mock-up of one of the Gaza tunnels. You see Barbara walking through the tunnel there. It's like a mock-up of how these hostages must feel underground in these tunnels. So we then proceeded from there on our journey to Jerusalem. We arrived there on Sunday afternoon, and we heard that there was a memorial event taking place that evening for one of these hostages, one of the people who was murdered there. He was a guy called Hirsch Goldberg Polin, who was murdered there, and who was quite a famous hostage because his family are quite vocal in the hostage community. And Hirsch was a young man from American-born who his family emigrated to Israel, and they lived in Jerusalem and part of a community in Baka, it's a part of Jerusalem, Old Jerusalem. And he went on that Simchat Torah. He went to this music festival in Nova Music Festival. He obviously was a bit of a rebel because he didn't tell his parents he was going there on Friday night, but so be it. And he was one of the people who ran for the music festival to try and reach safety, and they hid in an air raid shelter. And unfortunately, they were then bombed by Hamas in a shelter, and his arm was blown off, and he was taken captive by Hamas. And eventually, on the 31st of August, when the soldiers of Israel came into the tunnel to try and rescue him and 5 others, they found that he was dead. So we went down to, when we got to Jerusalem, we heard there's a memorial event taking place at his shul, his community, and you see there are throngs of people were moving there to get to this ceremony, which Barbara and I went to, and there was it was quite an emotive ceremony because there was a lot of speeches and a lot of singing and quite sort of sad songs. And then the following day, we understand that his funeral took place, and the streets of Jerusalem were lined with people waving Israeli flags and pictures of the hostages on his cortege to Har Menuchot for his funeral. It's a very emotive event anyway, so we were part of that. But then, on the Monday morning, we met up with the other participants in the Mizrahi project at the Mizrahi headquarters, and we got into 4 coaches, or 200 of us, and we got coaches down to an area called Otef Aza, which means the Gaza envelope. It means the border of the Gaza Strip. And we visited certain places there on our trip to find out what actually had happened on that fateful day. Our first stop was at the moshav called Nativ Ha'asara, and one of the residents there, Yael, that lady there in that photograph, she spoke to us about what happened on the 7th of October, and we see there on the right-hand side of the photograph there pictures of some of the people from her moshav who were murdered. We were told that on that day, 35 Hamas militants, some via paragliders and most via car, attacked this moshav. The militants killed at least 20 people, which included in some cases members of the same family. And before the massacre, the moshav, which was founded in 1982, was home to approximately 800 residents. Following the Israeli movement when they moved out of Gaza back in 2005, this moshav was the closest community to the Gaza Strip. It was right by the Erez crossing at the northern end of the Gaza Strip. So on that morning, as I said, militants came in there, and many residents fled to their safe rooms and to try and rescue themselves. This is one of the safe rooms. You see there that you see the bullet holes in the wall there. That it wasn't so safe for these people in there, unfortunately. There's some memorial candles there. Some people got killed in this room, but they didn't know what was going on. They ran. They tried to hide, and there was no one there to actually help them. Nothing happened. The security team tried, and 3 of them were actually killed in the fighting, alongside 21 residents. The power went out, the internet went down, and no one knew what was going on. After 6 hours in that morning, the IDF turned up and managed to fight off the Hamas gunmen and free the people. Now, the last victim from this particular town, her name was Bilha Yinon. She wasn't found until August 6, 2024. It took so many months to find her. And all that they found of her was a couple of teeth and some other DNA, and from that they determined that she had died, and they gave her a funeral. Some of the residents from this moshav have returned. A lot of them won't go back there. They can't face going back there. It's a beautiful moshav. You see there how close it was to the border. You can see there the actual border fence. We were walking, it's right in the middle of the moshav. It's right by the border, and they broke down the fence and came in there. So that was quite a sad place. And I'll return to this place further on in the talk. See, then we drove in the coach. We passed some of the kibbutzim which were affected. The famous one being Be'eri, kibbutz Be'eri, where many people were killed. Unfortunately, they don't like visitors nowadays. They want to rebuild the kibbutz, so they don't want visitors wandering around there. So the next stop we came to was what was known as the car graveyard. I don't know if you can. No, I can't blow this up. But there's a sign there. It's a graveyard. It's where all the destroyed cars are actually buried. Not buried. They're actually on display there. All the destroyed cars, the burnt-out vehicles, and you see there. Do you see all the burnt-out wrecks of cars? Each one has a story, and a girl gave us a talk there. Each one had a story. That vehicle belonged to so and so. That one belonged to so and so, telling us what actually happened with those cars. When they got all the cars and before they took all the cars down there off the roads, the Israeli Antiquities Authority and also Zaka, the people who trying to help identify bodies, they went through the cars and they found body parts and maybe they had to give them a burial and try and identify them. But they were left with piles and piles of ashes, which they couldn't identify. no DNA, there's no means of identifying. So what they had to do, they had to bury these ashes in a communal grave. And it's the first time since the Holocaust that Jews have been burnt to ashes and actually buried in a communal grave. It's quite sad. So it's a very sad place. You see there's some sort of flowers there, poppy flowers on some of the cars. It was quite a sad place anyway. The next step after this place called Tecuma, we went to a town called Ofakim, which is a small town 30 kilometers from the border. It's in the Negev. And we were met there by an Israeli policeman called Itamar Alus, who's a guy there in that picture. And he showed us around the town, and he told us his story, what actually happened on that fateful morning of Simchat Torah. He was an Orthodox guy, and he was on his way to shul that morning for Simchat Torah, Shabbat, 7 o'clock in the morning. He goes early to shul, and he was suddenly heard the sirens going. So he bundled off his family into the air raid shelters, and the sirens didn't stop. He didn't know what was going on. So being a policeman, he thought he'd better go out and investigate. So he grabbed a gun and went outside. He was wearing his Shabbat clothes and realised there were terrorists walking around the town shooting people. So he, being like a Rambo type person, he ran round and he told us how he went round shooting 1, 2, 3, just knocking them out basically. And he suddenly saw the rabbi lying in the street bleeding. So he just ran over to him and he covered him with his body while the terrorists were shooting over their heads, and luckily he saved him basically. And he then told us how he found a soldier bleeding out on the floor. A guy, he said, "What's your name?" He said, "My name's Dennis." So he said, the guy said to him, "Look, don't worry about me. I'm not going to survive this. Just get on and find the terrorists." And Itamar didn't want to. He commandeered a truck. He got this Dennis into a truck and he drove as fast as he could to the nearest hospital, which was in Beersheba, dumped Dennis in the hospital, then ran back to the town to try and find some more terrorists. Dennis survived. He survived, which was a miracle anyway. He told us how he was single-handed going around shooting down terrorists, and he was an absolutely very, very brave guy. And one of his police colleagues said to him, "Itamar, you can't run around like this. You haven't got a uniform on. You're dressed as an ordinary person. You can't go. They won't know who you are. The Israeli police will think you're a terrorist yourself. Identify yourself. Where's your hat?" He didn't have his hat. His hat was back in his house. So he said there was a dead policeman on the floor. He took the hat off his head, wiped the blood off, and put it on. And then he carried on, going on. And he showed us in the street bullet holes where this is where my friend so-and-so died, this is where so-and-so died. And he told us how he basically, one of his best friends was there lying, bleeding out. He just said the Shema with him, and the guy passed away. It's very, very sad. But he also told us a story about that suddenly one of the terrorists was in one of the houses, said, I surrender, I'm coming out, I surrender, please, no. If they said, right, hands up, put your hands up and throw your weapons to the ground and come out with your hands up. The guy came out, hands up, his guns thrown to the ground, and as he came out of the building, they saw that he had a package strapped to his leg. So Itamar just shot him twice in the head, and he was ready to blow himself up with the others. So Itamar actually has written a book. He gave us a copy of the book. It's all in Hebrew, but it's all about his story, what he did, where he went. It's all in English. Sorry, the book's actually in English, been translated. Quite a good book. Actually, you can get it on the internet. But he all his story, what he did, who he saved, etc. So when we finished with Itamar, there's a memorials there in the street. You see various certain people have fell. They put a plaque up for them. And this is a memorial to all the people of the town. There's Barbara and I, and there's the plaques there with the names of the people who from that town who died. But when he finished, I said to him, we all spoke to the guy, and said, "You're a hero. If you had lived in England, the king would have called you to Buckingham Palace and give you a medal, OBE or something." He said, "I don't need no medals. I just did what I had to do. I don't need any praise." And he was. There were so many people like him in Israel that day, who did so much good. There's a book out, in fact, I've got a copy here, you can see it, called One Day in October. It's a story of 40 different heroes, their stories, what they did. People sort of jumping in cars and driving right across the country in order to save people. They're absolutely amazing. Everyone united together to do what they could to try and stop, these terrorists, what they were doing. And then from Ofakim we drove to our last stop of the day, and we went to a place called, it's by Kibbutz Re'im, where the Nova Music Festival took place. Now, as I mentioned before, the Nova Music Festival is an annual event, a bit like Glastonbury, which we have in England, where all these youngsters get together, they have a rave, okay, they arrive there on the Friday, they're obviously not religious people, they arrive there on the Friday afternoon, Friday evening, and then they drink and they smoke, whatever they're smoking, and then they have a fun, and the music goes on all night long, right through to sunrise. They have this music blaring away. But what happened that morning was that at sunrise, suddenly they heard sirens going, and they heard shooting. And then they stopped the music festival and said to everyone, get out of here, terrorists here, you have to go run for your lives. So people started running and fleeing. Some of them had their cars, they weren't able to drive because they were still high on what they'd been smoking, so they couldn't drive. They're running in all directions, and the terrorists running off and just shooting them down. About 600 people were killed in that massacre. And you see there's like a ground, you see all those flags, there's flags flying in posts. There were just memorials to all the different people, pictures of with flags and pictures of each people. There's Barbara and I there in front of there. Unfortunately, we're smiling, which is not really appropriate in a place like that, but I suppose we're posing for the pictures. We saw all that and heard stories, and there's a map there of the complex, or what went on there, and there's various areas in the complex where people tried to hide. And then we saw you see these plaques there, like there's a story of the picture of the individual with some name, background to what they did and what their life story was. All youngsters, and it was it's very moving around there. There's a poppy field there of a memorial, and then we have this guy here. I don't know if I can put this on to play. Does it come out?
Yeah.
No sound, is there?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how to do that. All right, but this guy there was taking us around, and he came to this particular place and this memorial, and he said, this boy, he came to the festival, he did this and did that, and he said, and that's my son. And this guy has basically taken upon himself to build up this memorial, and actually, press what?
Where that? Press that.
There's no sound coming out.
There's no sound coming out.
No.
That's on mute.
No, I don't know.
Be muted.
Have you got? Are you on mute?
No, I'm not on mute. No, the sound's up. But I think there's the
video's on mute.
Maybe that thing's on mute. I don't know how it works. I don't know. So anyway, but he basically told us that was his son there. So it's very, very upsetting actually. And also I in my sort of over my years, I've been twice to Auschwitz on trips to Poland. Solidarity. One organised by this shul about 5 years ago, and one many years before that. In Auschwitz, as you know, it's quite a sad place. Okay, it's a very emotive place, but this was more moving than Auschwitz because this is current. This is young people. You can relate. This is current. You can relate to these people, so it's much more emotive than Auschwitz. Which, even though many more people were killed in Auschwitz, this was a very sad place. Anyway. From there, we went back and
Come closer to it.
Come closer to the microphone. Okay.
Yeah.
So from there, we went back to Jerusalem, and that night we had a dinner for all the participants. There's about 200 participants from all around the world at this conference, and we all had to wear these lanyards. You know what a lanyard is? It's with your name and who you are. So my lanyard said Rabbi Stephen Jacobson, Edgware United Synagogue. So I'll tell you the story. So we're sitting at a table having a meal, and there was an American guy with his wife sitting on the same table, Rabbi Doctor something or other. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, you're from Edgware?" I said, "Yeah." "Are you the rabbi who took over from Rabbi Rabinowitz?" I said, "No." It turned out that he was Rabbi Rabinowitz' next door neighbour in Jerusalem. So he went back and told his story. Guess who I saw? Anyway, so that's an aside. Anyway, so on the Tuesday, the second day, there were various tours to go on. Some people went to the Shura base where they used to identify the bodies of the victims they found. Some people went to Mount Herzl, where they went to the military cemetery to see the graves of some of the soldiers. And other people, we went on a tour of the Mount of Olives, which was not as, it's a historical tour rather than a sad tour. We had enough sad things on the day before. And then that evening, we assembled at the Kotel for the actual ceremony. So there were people there from Australia, United States, Canada, Holland, UK, and also there were relatives of the victims in whose name the Sefer Torah mantles have been dedicated. It was quite a solemn ceremony. Sorry, this is another picture from Nova Festival. This is a picture, that's about the ceremony there, and you see a picture there of the mantle, the Torah mantle, and I'll show you our Torah mantle in a second. But we had this ceremony. There was music from a guy called Yonatan Razel, who was a famous musician, quite emotive music actually. I'll see if I can. There's a picture of Barbara and I with, you see the mantles there, all set out there. Each one has the name of a synagogue on the back of it. There's me with the Edgware one. Again, I'm smiling. I shouldn't really be smiling. It's quite sad actually. But on the back of the Edgware one, it says who the mantle is dedicated in is memory of a lady called Naomi Shitrit, who was killed at Netiva Asara, the Moshav I first mentioned, we saw. She went out for a jog with some friends. She was jogging with some friends, and the terrorists came and shot them down. She and one friend got killed, and the other one luckily survived. But so there are the mantles there by the Kotel. You see the Kotel. It's the southern wall of the Kotel, not the western wall. It's a bit round the side where they're doing excavations, because we couldn't have the ceremony in the prayer section. And so this won't play now. Actually, what I will do now, the guy plays some songs, and he told us a story. Who's the guy who played the music? Told us a story of a soldier called. I'll see if I can put this on. 1 second. I think it's about. This is a video of the whole ceremony, and I think at about 30. 1 second. And a bit further on. So we had this in this talk. We had before we get on to these music, Rabbi Doron Peretz, who's the chief executive of Mizrahi, told a story about his family, because as you may know, he spoke at the shul actually a few months ago. But he had two sons in the army. One was in Gaza called Daniel, and the other one called Yonatan drove down there on that Simchat Torah to see if he could help. Yonatan, the one who drove down there, was seriously injured. And Daniel, the other son, disappeared and was suspected to have taken hostage. And Rabbi Peretz told the story about his son Yonatan, the injured one, was married a couple of weeks after the war, and they had to go through the wedding without the missing one being there. And then some months later, they announced that Daniel had actually died. They had a funeral for Daniel. They didn't have a body. They just, because the body is being held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. But what they did have was some blood. They had some clothes with blood on. The rabbi said they can bury that, and they could have a funeral and have a shiva till they declared him dead anyway. So, and he told his story. He broke down. It was quite moving. But then this singer spoke. If I can find where it is, about 105. And what I'll try and do is I'll just take this out, so you should hear the music, hopefully. If it plays now, 1 second. Oh, also gone quiet, isn't it? Hold on a second. You can't hear, you can't see it, but you can hear, hopefully. 1 second. Wait a second, I'll see if I can get it to sing. No, nothing's happening.
It's very hard to
it's not, no, you can't hear anything. 1 second, so I'll tell you. I won't. Can you hear this?
Yes. Near the mic. Stephen, put near the mic.
Can you hear it?
That's better.
I'll tell you what it's about in a second. So what it's about is there was a soldier called Yossi Hershkovitz, a 34-year-old soldier. Oh, okay. Cool.
No, we can't hear you now.
Okay. So what happened was, there's a soldier called Yossi Hershkovitz who basically was a bit of a musician. So he was sorry about that. Okay, it's him. So this Yossi Hershkovitz was a soldier in the army. He was a bit of a musician. And what happened was, on his final mission, he started humming a tune to himself. Estam ki elech kigei Psalmavik, Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Psalm 23. I will fear, even though I'm going to the valley of the shadow of death. He's singing this song to his colleagues in the army, and he got blown up. It was a booby trap thing. He got killed. So anyway, a few days later at the Shiva, his army colleagues came to the Shiva house, and they said, the last thing he said to us, Yossi, was this song. And they sang this song to the parents at the Shiva, and it was then recorded. It was recorded, and it's now a famous song in Israel, which this guy composed just before his death in Gaza. So he sang it at that evening at the ceremony. It was quite sad actually. So moving on. So let's see what the next picture I've got here for you is. Yeah, so that's picture. Yeah, so eventually, after all the speeches and the music and the songs, eventually each synagogue was called out to meet their family representatives. So Barbara and I were called out to represent Edgware, and we met this guy called Shlomo Azulai. He is the brother of Naomi Shitrit, the girl who was killed jogging Netiv HaSarah. He's the brother. And he lives in Bet Shemesh. He's Orthodox. His Sephardi. The sister was secular, but so that's nothing to complain about. This guy was so overwhelmed when he met us. He was so chuffed that people in the diaspora could want to honour someone who's killed in Israel we had no connection with. And when we saw him, he grabbed us. And he was hugging and crying. It was most, and as you see, look at my face and Barbara's face there. We had a picture. Just someone took a picture of the two of us with him. We were so compared to the other pictures earlier, we're smiling. Here we're just completely. It was very, very sad actually. This guy actually has been in contact with me since then. He sends me messages, Shabbat Shalom messages, and Chag Sameach, and I sent him a picture of the Sefer Torah. I think what I'll do now is I will. Show you the Sefer Torah. So it's in the ark here. I'll get it out. Actually, 1 second.
Got the lights on, Stephen.
There's a light behind there.
Yeah.
Where's the light?
Right. So this here is the Sefer. It's not. We didn't donate a Sefer. It's donated this mantle. The mantle. So it says on the mantle, 8 Sephod, but 8 Rakod. A time to mourn and a time to dance. This is from the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, which we read on Sukkot. In other words, it's time for everything. And it says here at the bottom, Ilui Nishmat Hanesafim, in the memory of the souls of those who are gathered to the people, Biyom Simchat Torah, on the day of Simchat Torah 5784, Uva Milchamot, Charivot Barzel, and in the war of the Battle of Iron. So it's in memory of them. That's the same mantle every synagogue has, and on the back it says donated by Edgware Synagogue in memory of Naomi Shitrit, Hashem Yinkum Dama, may God avenge her blood, who was cruelly taken on the 7th of October 2023, 22nd of Tishri 5784. And each synagogue has a different inscription on the back in the name of the person whose memory is remembered. So this lady is remembered in our synagogue, and this Sefer Torah was used on the high holidays on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and it will be used frequently thereafter. So I'll put it back in there and I'll carry on my talk. Right, so lights again if you want to. Well, actually, you can turn the light, leave the lights on there if you want to, because nothing much, no other pictures. So where do we go from here? So Israel is still in a state of shock of what happened on the 7th of October. Hostages are still being held in Gaza well over a year later. Who knows whether they are dead or alive, or what their state of health is after a year in captivity. As of today, 800 Israeli soldiers have been killed in this battle. Today, the 800th was killed today in this continuing war in Gaza, and more recently in Lebanon. Rockets are still being fired into all parts of Israel, and unfortunately there have been some casualties in parts of Israel. Some people say that Israel will never be the same again. The question is, how was it possible for Israeli intelligence not to know what was happening, what Hamas was planning to do on that day? Why did they send so many soldiers on leave for that Simchat Torah? Why were the borders so undefended? We don't know what was going on there. This was a plan, you see. We have to believe that this was God's plan. Okay, why do all these things happen? You can't understand it, because Israel is usually so good and so on guard for everything. They know what's going on. How did it happen? And why did it take so long for the army to actually get to the south to free these kibbutzim? In some cases, it was many, many hours before they got to the kibbutzim and saved the people. Why? No one understands what was going on there. There'll obviously be an inquiry at some stage, and some heads maybe will roll. Some government people will lose their jobs because they're found to be at fault. But only time will tell what's going to go on there. So, where's the hope? Where's the hope? I said destruction and hope. I spoke a lot about destruction, about what happened there. It's very sad. But there's hope. Because in our history, we have a long history of bad things happening to us. But always there's a light that appears at the end of the tunnel. There's always had that. The temple was destroyed. People were sent into exile in Babylon. And what happened in Babylon? They set up academies of learning, and they had great rabbis and published the Babylonian Talmud, which we use today, from the destruction. There were crusades in Europe. The Crusaders went across Europe and to free the Holy Land from the infidel, whatever it was, from the Arabs. And on the way across Europe, what did they do? They killed all the Jews they found on the way as well. Many, many thousands of Jews were killed in those crusades. But what came of that? More Torah study, and famous rabbis and famous volumes of Jewish learning came out even though there was that destruction in Europe. More recently, we had the Holocaust. 6 million Jews were brutally murdered by the Nazis. But what came from that? The Holocaust was the birth pang of the new state of Israel. Had it not been for the Holocaust, maybe the state of Israel wouldn't have been established in 48. Who knows? So light always appeared at the end of the tunnel. And then now we have this massacre in Israel. So there has to be a light. Something must come out of it. And what it did show us, one thing, is before Simchat Torah last year, there was a lot of strife in Israel, a lot of demonstrations against the government and against this and that. And there's a lot of division in Israel. But what did that do, that war? It united the people, one common cause, had one common enemy to fight. So they all united, and people were just dropping everything and going to help. And also, there's been an increase in religious observance because of this war. You saw pictures that a lot of soldiers wanted to wear tzitzit, the fringes we round to our clothes. And there were people working day and night to prepare tzitzit to take to these soldiers who were not observant people. They wanted to wear tzitzit. There were restaurants in Tel Aviv which weren't kosher, but they wanted to send food down to the soldiers in the army, so they had to get their kitchens koshered to make it under rabbinical approval so that they would accept the food in the army. So people were becoming more observant. There was a story of a girl who she was in one of these safe rooms in a kibbutz somewhere and surrounded by terrorists, and she was praying that she would be let out safely. And she said she made an oath to God. So look, if I come out of this properly, I'm going to keep Shabbat from now onwards. And she did. As a secular girl, she came out of there and she now keeps Shabbat because she made a promise to God. If I survive, that's what I'm going to do. So hopefully there will be something coming out of this. We hope that there will be peace. There will be peace between Israel and the Palestinians and all their Arab neighbours. We hope that the Hamas movement will be completely dismantled. The end of fighting, end of wars. But only time will tell. It's all in God's hands. We Jews are a peaceful people. We believe in hope. We pray for peace 3 times a day in our prayers, in the Amidah. Oseh Shalom Bimromah. We pray for peace 3 times a day. Our national anthem, HaTikvah, means the hope. We have hope. We have hope that there will be peace. And that's what we believe in. So, I can finish by saying, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. He who makes peace in his high places, may he make peace for us and all of Israel, and let us say Amen. Am Yisrael Chai. Now what I'm going to play you now, again I can't do it on the screen, it doesn't work, I have to just do it on my computer. If I take this down, sorry, put it on now. This is a song which is, it's like the hymn of the war, praying for safety. And you see the pictures there. You can see, it's a bit far away, the pictures of all the hostages. We're praying for the people who are held in captivity, and we've got pictures of all the hostages that were at the end of the war. We sing this song in Shul every Shabbat morning. We say prayers for Israel. You see, you can join in if you want to. Israel. That's it. So, any questions? You can ask questions. Sorry it's so depressing, but it was a very depressing time. We have to remember what happened there.
I can't clap. Ashkar to you. Thank you very, very much. It's very difficult to clap in this situation, and it's very, very upsetting. If anybody has any questions for Stephen? No questions? It was so intense. Thank you very much. It was fantastic. Thank you very much. Can I please give you a little token of